Press from there. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Once again, thanks for joining up with us this evening. Hope everybody's keeping safe despite this coronavirus. Once again, delighted to say that Mr. Fleetside is here again. Lead guitarist in
the Gnarlies.
That's right, the Gnarlies. Yes. Yes. So welcome, Mr. Fleetside. Great to have you back on again. And can I just say that it's been an excellent series that you've put together. You've sent me stuff. You've even kept a note of the dates of the various videos that we've done, which is absolutely brilliant because at times I can be a bit scatterbrained. So no, thanks for that. Well, once again, thank you. Sorry, not just welcome. A welcome and a thank you for joining me tonight because it's great having you on board.
Yeah, the great 4,000 miles apart.
Yes.
The other great divide.
That's right. Yes. And I will try not to start speaking any Scottish. Oh. See you, Jimmy. How's it going anyway? How's the coronavirus doing?
Canada's in a bit of a shutdown. Here it is St. Patrick's Day, and we've got pubs are closed. I don't know whether it's Scotland, but and a small pub in the area here could do 25, 30K easily. It's a big day for them, and so a lot of responsibility on the shoulders of these bars to shut down, self-regulate. It's quite impressive that they would take that position.
Well, as long as they're getting some sort of compensation. We had here in Scotland, we had the Scottish rugby team were due to play against Wales. Down at the Millennium Stadium. The Millennium Stadium holds about 80,000 under the roof, and they cancelled it on the night before they were due to play. So all the Scotland fans, 10,000 Scotland fans, had already gone down to the game. But the rumour I'm hearing is that they only cancelled once they were assured of a certain amount of like a compensation package.
Oh yeah.
In order to do that, and you're fearful of some of the local businesses. What are they going to get?
Yeah. Oh yeah, the people in the bars laid off here. It's and with uncertainty, so it's not easy on a lot of people. And of course, the deeper concern is the malady itself. And
but there's a few people that have joined us, so I'm just going to give a quick shout out. In fact, maybe you could give it. Have you got the list of?
I don't. No, I don't have it.
Right. No worries. I'll do that then. So to Hazel and David and Ernie, Julie, Catnit, she was with Linda Kay just a wee while ago. Jerome of the French Wrecking Crew. I'm sure he's the Belgian Wrecking Crew, but anyway. And Julie, Lulu, Disco Pervert. Oh, Mill Billy's here. Moving on 04. Cherie, Disco Pervert. I like that name. Disco Pervert. Well, good evening, everybody. Isn't this good? I mean, sometimes it's only every couple of weeks that we manage to get a video together, and I think this is the second time that we've done one within a few days. And I'm still, to be honest, I'm still waiting on a certain amount of feedback from some other people, to say, what's going on here. It's an interesting dynamic here because it's almost as if, as you say, from a social point of view, maybe it's a subject that maybe some people are a bit apprehensive of giving their opinion.
Yeah, so it might be a taboo subject, so we may be guilty of breaking a taboo. And there are others who I know are sort of intentionally guarded for future. There'll be future surprises, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, it's all over to you, good sir. I will put up the first screen if you would like.
Yeah, the first slide. So
yes.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Screen operator, get your act together. Here we go. Here we
Yeah.
go. Click on that. Oh, yes.
Yes, we're
and
down.
we'll click on this. And I think starting there it is. Yes.
Okay. So this is and maybe what I'll do is I'm just going to adjust my. I've got 4 screens in front of me, so I'm getting a suntan as we present.
You show off. I've only got a computer, a laptop, and an iPhone.
Well, I don't know what to do with them, but I got 4. So so these are the screen that you have up there, Paul. These are the 3 parts that we've done. So far, we've done 2. We're about to do the 3rd. The first one was the Making a Murder Analysis of Truth or Analysis, the Quest for the Holy Grail. Oh, yes. And that was their sort of kickoff on March 3rd. And then this one, the last one we did was Two Truths Are Told, borrowing from Mr. Shakespeare there.
Yes.
And that was March 14th. And then here we are, March 17th. And today's is Probity and Analysis on Managing the Great Divide. So this is what you were talking about, sort of the taboo subject. And we'll break into that.
Sure. So
the next slide is simply our title slide. I don't think it's very exciting. Generous use of various colors there. And and so we'll sort of break into the next slide.
Okay. I think that's a great slide. I like that. It's
I had to get the colors right. So today's agenda, what I was going to propose is a 6-parter. I was going to go into a bit of background as to what on earth led me to analyze analyses for a living.
Well, yes.
You mean who in the right mind, right? So then I wanted to talk about what I refer to the 2 vectors. So that first bit sets context for what I refer to as the 2 vectors, which we're going to use as a storyboard. Then I'll get into probity in our institutions, an observation on the mainstream media. We'll do a little deeper dive on what's happening there. And then get into the more immediate paper that we shared there the other day, Probity and Analysis on Managing the Great Divide. And then I'll use that 2 vectors to come back in the conclusion to sort of situate where we are on a bit of a storyboard there, give it some context.
Sure.
So go ahead there, Paul.
I was going to say, are you going to mention that wonderful story that you sent me? Of the guy looking for the
that'll be in there. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. So and I'll mainly talk to these. There are only 2 other slides, and I'll give you the cue as to when
they're ready to go.
Okay. So the first thing is what on earth led me to analyze analyses for a living? Obviously, it's a Paul and dulling sport to analyze to begin with, and to analyze analyses of all things. I think the quick answer to that is that I couldn't make the football team, and I was the poor kid in the schoolyard that never got picked, and so turned to analysis, as the recreational sport of choice, and then. But upon really getting into analyses, I was have been amazed through my life at the distortions in analysis that we use as opportunity. So distinguishing between sound analyses, as we've all learned them, how to do it in school, and these opportunist representations, which are referred to as sort of sociolytics. Now, there's a bit of a longer story. But I'll briefly run through that. I was a kid in 1963, of all things, so I go way back. And I was home from kindergarten when the mailman came to our door in all excitement, and I was standing behind my mother, trying to see the mailman, what he was on about. But he was explaining the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So I think President Kennedy was killed around 12:30. So I'm guessing this would have been roughly 1 o'clock on a Friday, November 22nd, 1963. And certainly, that left quite an impression. So as I remember it, the mailman told us that our president was shot. Now, the only problem with that is I lived in Canada, so wasn't our president, but hey, I was a kindergartner, so.
Yes.
But certainly, that sticks in my mind. And then through the weekend, we watched The Intrigue, and then on the Sunday morning, Oswald was killed by Ruby, and so we were watching this whole thing. Cartoons were canceled, first of all, so it was very traumatic. But so we watched this whole thing unfold on our gasoline-powered CRT, this antique-looking thing. But it left a stain. But the main thing that came from that is society writ large analyzed this lone gunman theory and the Oswald speculation, and set out a number of different alternative hypotheses. But it was interesting enough that the official story, certainly from government in any of those countries, US, Canada, Australia, UK, stuck to the one lone gunman, and that was the only story that was portrayed, and all it is was permitted, and that's the same to this very day. So, notwithstanding society's reaction with the diversity of views, there was this tremendous issue in thinking outside the box to alternatives. Now, later in life, of course, 9/11 came along, and the official story of 19 hijackers from cave in Afghanistan is the only version that's permitted, and that is where certainly official governments go, and that's where the mainstream media goes, and that's where the public is required to go. Notwithstanding the potential that there are alternative stories, or even if that one were correct, that was something we would find for ourselves if we investigate. So there's in both of those heart-wrenching examples, there is an etiquette that is required. That's the real takeaway of what my intent wasn't really to get into those situations, but an extreme etiquette. And this is where the next slide comes up. It's an XY axis. Let's see if you can if we can impose upon you to put that up there. But out of all my years of studying those and looking at the different theories, and watching and evaluating the mainstream media and where it goes, the conclusion in my mind really comes down to two lines, which is coming up there.
Sure.
So this is the two vector diagram. So there's an x-axis and a y-axis. Along the y-axis, I chart the principle of a quest for truth, and along the x-axis, the tactic in a quest for social advantage. And to me, if you look at any of the organizations that analyze these things, they're caught between the X and the Y. So in those, one comes at the expense of the other. These are opposites. The extent to which you follow one, you recede on the other. So you can't simultaneously maximize social advantage and maximize the quest for truth. You're rowing in one direction or the other. So the two vectors are social convenience versus analytic truth. You'll notice on the x-axis, so this is the ambit of social protection. So people that analyze for the purpose of social advantage We'll use sociolytics, something we talked about last time, which is a representation as an analytic, as a sound analysis that falls short on one of the principal precepts of sound analysis. They also can use this retort conspiracy theorist society's autoimmune social protection circuitry, where people, upon hearing a conspiracy theory, sort of shut down the conversation as an excuse not to look. But the point in that is there's a social etiquette that we have to that we have to maintain as we think in terms of something that might be conspiratorial. And this is, other than certainly conspiracies in other lands are fair game, but not in our backyard, sort of thing.
NIMBYism.
So this is so these are, along the x-axis, you've got social protection. Now, the idea of installing blinders to would stunt your intellectual growth if you actually kowtow to etiquette as opposed to looking. And we know that there's a fine line between open-mindedness and loose-mindedness. I look at the difference between those as to whether you're navigating to sound analytic method or not. So open-mindedness is good. Now, the interesting thing in looking at those X and Y axes is it's not that one is good and one is bad. If you maximize on either front, there's a problem. So if I took it upon myself, as I often do, to try to represent analytic purity, and let's say that that's the y-axis, and I will do all that's required to uncover truth, and as my orientation at one time was. And I've mentioned before, this is like the Spock on the Starship Enterprise. This is the mind that's focused on truth, no emotion, no Y component. The problem with that is it can defeat social decorum. The truth is not necessarily convenient to the social fabric within which we are all working together. So if everybody thought the way I did, society itself would likely fail, and all the wonderful things we require from society would be in jeopardy. Putting it the other way around, if all you do is follow social advantage in your analyses and forget the truth, then you can probably live happy for a while, but you become fairly delusional. So obviously, every one of us, and me included, confronts a trade-off. When is the opportune time to speak the truth? Am I guarded in what I say? Am I reserved? Do I have to follow an etiquette? Do I have to dumb down the analysis to go a certain way? But the question that I was going to leave the first section, actually we're into the second section here, is the, which reflects Manitowoc today, right? So if you look at that enclave called Manitowoc, or even in the broader Wisconsin, what we've seen of it, there's a society there that's trying to preserve and protect its comfort, and would probably prefer this whole thing goes away, and you can take your truth train and find another track and get out of here, sort of thing.
Sure.
So it's an interesting challenge. Now,
so can I
go ahead? Yeah.
Just go back, just a quick one. It's just on the basis that looking at obviously this axis. That's like 30 years of. Sure.
It comes down to two lines.
Yeah, but can we hope that sometimes the quest for the truth will go along the lines of quest? That there would be a perfect 45% incline there.
Yeah. So there's a couple of ways that can happen. It can happen by the heretic, someone that's breaking out of the conventions of the social expectation. This is the king wears no clothes syndrome. Was that Anderson? So it can happen that way. A maverick that will that will stick to the truth regardless. Or it can happen by happenstance, but it doesn't tend to happen by design in society, where the primordial thing is to keep a peaceful social setting, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So this starts to walk down the road of probity in our institutions, and this trade-off between the social and the idea of the truth at all cost.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, another thing I quickly made a note of just then is it's funny. I particularly like a group called Groove Armada, and they have a. Sorry, I'm going to put this back on the main screen. They have a song, and it's called "If Everybody Looked the Same," and the line is, "We'd get tired of looking at each other." And so my sort of take on that is, if everybody thought the same, we'd get fed up of speaking to each other, wouldn't we?
Yeah. So diversity is the spice of life.
Yes.
But the key point, the key point I draw from that X and Y axis, and again, it took me a long time. I was a news junkie up until, as in I absorbed every bit of news I could get from the mainstream media up until about a decade ago. And now I filter it all through that X and Y.
Yes.
Recognizing that the mainstream media isn't there to tell you the truth. So this starts to foreshadow the circumstance in Manitowoc, and I'll get to that. But yeah.
So I'm particularly keen on looking at the media in Manitowoc in particular.
Yeah.
And as I said to you earlier, when you look at certain contrasts between the two countries that make up two of the three countries that make up the continent in North America, then I'm well aware that the media have a lot to answer for in North America and Canada. The contrast in the media there.
Yeah, and my study of it, I would suggest the whole free world is caught with the similar media. So I don't isolate U.S. as being particularly different. In Canada, for example, we've got a state-funded or heavily subsidized. Basically, it's a crown corporation. But nonetheless, you take any event of major import and you'll get the same news as you switch between. You want to go to the UK, you want to go to Australia, you want to go to the US, Fox, NBC, ABC, CBS, all of them. Or Canada, you're getting a very similar position. You're not getting a whole lot of diversity in opinion. Certainly, for example, touching back to the JFK assassination or 9/11, you're going to be, they're all on the same page, and which is interesting. But then again, I think because their social vector is more important than the other. So I'm gonna touch on that before I get to our lovely mainstream media. I was going to try to just touch on probity in our institutions in general, and then one of which, of course, is the mainstream media. Sure. We talked a bit about this last time, but the notion that certainly we've got many institutions socially that we rely upon, and three of interest in the Stephen Avery case, of course, is the police, the government, the courts. Yeah. These social institutions have referred to as constitutional frameworks. They've got, in other words, they've got legal underpinnings that define what they're to do and what they're to stand for. And the reason that they've got these, and they can be quite elaborate terms of reference, the reason for that is because the natural human behavior would take us down a different path without it. So we should expect, should any of those institutions be undermined in terms of probity, the natural result would be a corruption, right? So it shouldn't be a surprise to us. That's the very reason we've got all these undergirding rules and regulations. So it's a bit of a civic duty of all of us to be vigilant and to keep them. We're part of the formula that keeps them on the straight narrow, which brings us to the truther movement. So while we, upholding the duty of healthy skepticism, so we're there to monitor that sort of thing.
Safeguard.
Yeah. And we note any, insurrections that would be against their constitutional underpinnings. We note the alignment, the spirit and intent of the Constitution that drives them, and thus we're part of the formula that keeps the social institution healthy.
Yes.
So one could say we are pro-Constitution in that sense of it. We're not undermining, we're not attacking. We have a natural role in avoiding the natural behavior and making sure that the checks and balances are in place and are observed. Now, to the contrary, if you take analytic malfeasance, those that engage in sort of social or tactical warfare to outmaneuver, and this I ascribe to the guilters, as we did in the first video. Sure. I notice I say we there, Paul. I'm tying you to the same mast, but certainly I was, suggesting the guilters are on that path. I would say that is a corruption that does undermine, is injurious to the Constitution. So heaven forbid if there's corruption that we point out and it's left unabated, then you've got a growing problem with your social institution. So in other words, people, the truther movement is a good thing. It's good and wholesome. The other side, I would suggest, is a bad thing for the well-being of the social fabric of the community in the long term.
Yeah, I must admit, I often got the impression, talking with Sheriff Herman, that he would be quite happy if I would just accept everything he said and just move on and take don't worry about it. We've got this covered. We know what we're doing. You can worry about other things in the musical world, and you can leave this up to us because we're fine here.
We've got it in hand. Move along. And in the short term, I guess we could agree that in the short term it would be less disruptive, right? Yeah. But in the long term, things just fester and get worse, and you'll have the next persecution that public institutions shouldn't be persecuting. They should be rightfully trying under the rules that are established for them.
Well, to me, it's the old adage: if you give an inch, they'll take a mile. Yeah. The more leeway you give them, the more they will then pervert the cause of justice in future cases.
Yeah, and this is the beauty of an expanding network of truthers, because it doesn't seem like we're going away anytime soon. No, and we're just analysts.
Yes.
We're not. Our strongest weapon is a pen and fingers at a keyboard. We're thinkers, right? That's it. Yeah. But a formidable force when you're in the court of public opinion, and information becomes the key. Absolutely. So that's sort of the end of that section 3, this good guy, bad guy thing. So I think we're the good guys and they're the bad guys, and so hey, we can all live happily ever after on that road to paradise. But so item 4, the mainstream media observation. So certainly the mainstream media is one of our institutions. And by calling the media is a profession, it's a recognized profession. It's to perform a role as an objective inquisitor. So it should be on that diagram. The one you're on there. We'll get to the next one in a. The one. Sticking on that one.
There you go. Yeah, sorry. Observation of the mainstream media. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So or we can go down one diagram there, the XY axis. So where the mainstream media is supposed to be is on the Y axis, right? So what we expect is the mainstream media to be following that, and by professional calling, they're to be maximizing that. Yeah. That's the professional nature of a reporter. Of the media in general. Arguably, if they're doing their job, though, we wouldn't need truthers. What would happen is we would all sit at home on the couch eating popcorn, waiting for the news to give us the information we need, and that ain't happening, right? So
I think you are the king of wishful thinking there.
Yeah, right. So hence the truther movement is a reaction to a lack of positioning by others,
Yes.
And so the truthers are rising to the occasion to fill a void that others who have a duty to professional calling and a professional duty are not adhering to. So the mainstream media, in my view, follows the y-axis more extensively. They're more inclined that way, invariably and across the board. So all those syndicated news programs that we mentioned, and BBC and in Canada, Australia, virtually everywhere. Across the board, the intent is to perhaps enhance your pleasure, to enhance your interest, to confirm your hopes, to confirm your biases, whatever. There can be many socially inclined reasons why the media does the messaging it does, but it is substantively, in my submission, an X vector tool. It's very close to the X axis, or it's certainly not observing the y-axis that the diagram would require. And so, in my view, I've again was a news junkie up until about a decade ago, and then it hit me, and there was this tremendous transformation. But so I don't go to the mainstream media as a primary information source, although it is important to keep tabs to see, what everybody else is getting, what's being fed.
Yes.
But I wouldn't consider it the bastion of y-axis critical analytic thinking. It's tethered more to a social orientation. And just so there are obviously two current events that have hit the public, have mesmerized the global community, the two I would identify as the global warming and the coronavirus, the COVID-19. And it's interesting how the whole global community is seized with those two. And I would argue that global warming's kind of waned. People have passed on that as they focus on the immediate concern.
Yeah.
But in a Y sense, the social dimensions of reporting and those, it's wonderful. Here's the upside. Here's an example of a positive, uplifting social dimension. So an x-axis versus y. The wonderful to see the international community in lockstep in self-regulating, right? So the notion as we entered this thing that the bars would close down and people would forego the profit, that people being laid off would suffer the burden, that people overseas will come home. Everyone is dutifully, everything I've seen, there's just been this social outpouring of conformance, which is important if this thing is of the proportion that is being reported, and that's the upside. Now, there's always that alternative on the y-axis where it's frightening to see how much trust we need to have in our institutions, right? So bringing the institutions back into it, we rely on these institutions to give us good, proper, and accurate information because this is going to recalibrate fortunes and power structures in the world, rightly or wrongly. It's going to create a great transformation, and this idea of the trust that we have on our institutions, if it's miscast, would amount to a voluntary servitude. Right? You'd be packing in and giving your liberties to certain power structures. So that's the sort of the downside. The upside is the social orientation that people have voluntarily taken on to beat this thing, and the downside is what happens if heaven forbid you can't trust your social institutions. So So that brings us. Those are sort of entry discussion points to the fifth, which is this paper, the Probity and Analysis on Managing the Great Divide. So the point in there, when I look at the truther community, there seems to me there's a disturbance in the force. We've got these two camps that I had referred to, the micro and the macro truthers. So I think we lost Paul there. We have to, but I'll keep rambling. So there's a disturbance in the force. The idea that society, and that is a society as well. The truthers are a society. We're wandering down a path where we sort of skew things to the micro theories. There seems to be a shunning of these voices in the macro realm. Anyone that's suggesting there's a larger conspiracy, a larger setup, is the tendency is to shun that sort of discussion and push that to the side. And that includes the prospect of say, those that have advanced alive theories, or those that have referred to more than one RAV, or many of these other larger constructs that would clearly amount to a larger manipulation than simply the micro quest. So coming back to the micro, the question is for micro truthers is basically who done it, who killed Teresa Halbach, and they search based on the October 31, 2005 in Manitowoc. In the macro, on the other hand, the question is, did the syndicate operate to perpetrate, in a nutshell? So first of all, is there a syndicate? How can there be a syndicate? What would this be? There's not supposed to be a syndicate within the hallowed halls of our professional institutions. They're to be operating to the moorings of their constitution and legal obligations. I think Paul's back. Are you back there, Paul?
I apologize for that. I had a similar problem on Sunday, so I'm just trying to bring up the screen. So just bear with me, because I'll bring that one up there. There we go. And
we have two Pauls to look at.
Well, there you go. Could it possibly get any better? Possibly, I think.
I thought maybe you were getting bored and you froze there. That was.
I'll tell you what, I was going to say, I nearly clicked on a third one of me. That would have been even better, wouldn't it? In triplicate. But here we go. Let's try this again.
You'd have me outnumbered. Then you can vote. And I'm gonna get to that. May have lost him again. We'll have to get this technology sorted out. So I'll keep rambling, and he'll come back. So anyway, on the macro question, did a syndicate operate? So what would this syndicate be? So people have talked about PEG-L, for example, but there should be no place in these institutions for a syndicate per se. But the deeper question is, would they do it? Could they do it? And did they do it? Now, what I'm having trouble understanding in the truther community is a bit of a inconsistency. So the truthers have clearly put out there the 40-year pattern of, if I could use the term, malfeasance, I guess I'd call it. There's been a 40-year pattern. People have dug up a lot of the detail going back pre-1985 and on forward through the two incarcerations. And there's been a lot of uncovering of social engineering in there. People understand. I wouldn't worry about. You're back, Paul, are you?
I am indeed, and I'm going to try. I'm going to try this once more.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that last slide yet, because we're not there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we're going to lose you, and it's more critical that we have you then.
Oh, I doubt that.
But I'll give you we'll have a discussion on that last slide when I get to that. So anyway, I was just relaying the idea of the macro theories and the micro theories, and we went over that the other day, and how, to me, there's a bit of a incongruence with the macro theories and and there's a reason we seem to stay away from them, and that may have something to do with an etiquette. It may be a concern for certain sensitivities. There could be a number of things that are driving it, but better to have two Pauls than two Kratz, right? That's correct. So this is, but it could be on the other hand this, and this is where I was going to get into this little story that you mentioned, Paul. So it's called the Streetlight Effect.
Sure.
And many of you have probably heard it. It's been well told many times. What it comes down to is basically the choice between a search of convenience and the more arduous task of following a deeper quest. And so the story goes a little like this, and I'll tell the version. This is a David Freeman, I believe, was credited with it, but I'll give you the version that as I first heard it. I'll just sort of read it out.
Yeah.
So a policeman comes upon a drunk man bent over searching for something under a streetlight and asks what the drunk has lost. He says he lost a coin, and the policeman bends over to help the poor man, and they both look together. After a few minutes, the policeman asks, "Where precisely did you drop the coin?" The drunk man says, "Over there," and points down the road. The policeman asks, "Then why are we searching here?" And the drunk replies, "Because the light is better." Right. So there are many variants on that, but it raises the question: Are we looking where it's convenient to look, and are we doing that at the expense of covering the whole territory that should be considered? We know that the 40-year elephant in the room, the 40-year elephant in the room that we talked about.
On the roof? No, in the room.
On the roof, yeah. That would be structurally unsound.
I think so.
See, I have an engineering background. I forgot to mention that. So, but we know that there does appear to be a syndicate of with a vendetta, right? So going back pre-Bernstein, and how that is permitted, and certainly if that's uncovered, I mean, that's newsworthy onto itself. Then we had the vendetta pre-85, the wrongful incarceration, the exoneration, a surveillance that took place, another incarceration, the intense campaign of subterfuge that we've experienced since the last incarceration to try and keep a lid on and make the truthers go away. And, under the current court system, there appears to be this intellectual gymnastics. And the whole thing appears almost as if choreographed. So, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it might be a duck. And so it would seem to me, rather than consuming all the oxygen room on the micro stories, there should be some discussion there on the macro. And my own experience in looking and in talking to people is there seem to be quite a number that hold that privately as a thought and are reluctant to bring that out publicly for whatever reason. Yes. So, and there could be good reasons I'm just not privy to. But if you wanted to try and find a smoking gun, I think there's a good place to go look for it, and I'm not sure the extent to which we're sort of going there. Now, whether or not the macro is correct, this would include, let's say, the alive theories, relocation theories, multi-ravs. But any of those are, I would argue, small potatoes compared to the known sort of social engineering that we've witnessed over the 40 years, right? So it's not incongruent. It's not of any different stature. It would be legitimately within the pale, and therefore I'm still struggling to understand why we perhaps don't go there. So much as the macro truthers bear the burden for parsimony, so we talked the other day, anybody who does come forward bravely enough to talk about some grander conspiracy, that's an extraordinary claim which requires extraordinary explanation. But by the same token, the micro truthers, those that are limiting their search to a whodunit in 2005 Manitowoc, they have a burden to explain why it's okay to take 40 years of that social engineering off the table, so that the coincidentally the simplicity of their story could operate. So it's either path is arduous, and we should, as truthers, we should impart skepticism. I'm not saying we should jump on the board with on the bandwagon with either one. In the interest of science, you put both on the storyboard, and you challenge both responsibly. And as you come into more information, you see which one is more confirming. But you don't for a moment take a social position to deny the ability to look, to pigeonhole to one. So thus I'm merely suggesting there appears to be an imbalance in the solution set. And I'm not saying, one's right or one's wrong, but I would suggest it would be appropriate to have a course correction somewhere out there in truther land to put some weight around these other, this greater controversy, if I could put it that way.
Absolutely, yeah.
So this is where I was going to get to that other diagram, and hopefully we're not going to lose you, Paul.
Well, you're hoping, but I'm going to say some of the people might be hoping differently because I tell you, the fact that I've got you on my phone here, right? Yeah. So I've got it going on here, and I can see that you're carrying on fine without me. So.
Yeah, but I was much smaller, and they may prefer to look at you than me.
Well, let me try this. What I'll do is I'll click on the buttons slightly slower because I seem to be trying to go too quickly, and maybe that's what part of the problem is. Maybe I'm just clicking on them a little bit too. So let me try that.
So what we're trying to pull up here, and I think we've lost him again. I'll try and describe it, and just to keep things moving along. So it's basically the XY diagram again. We can post that later, but what I wanted to map out is where the macro truthers are, the micro truthers, where the guilters lie, and I'm going to position the courts on there, and the mainstream media, and then the key question, and we can leave that as a question: is where does Ms. Zellner reside in this trade-off? So, if and when he gets that pulled up, the macro truthers are pretty much hugging that sort of y-axis, in the sense that they're your back, Paul, right? Yeah, we can't seem to get that diagram up there.
I'll try again because I've got. This is weird. I've got three of me in front of me, right? Yeah. And I could click on all three, and
I can see the Paul twin.
I've got me there, but nothing's come up, and I've got that one there. I'll remove that one. So that's looking good so far.
So that's the two good-looking guys.
Yeah, I'm going to try this once more. I'm going to do something slightly different. Try that. I'm going to try this. There we go. Let's try this one. See if that one will work better.
I don't think it did. So I think in order to do justice to that, we need the diagram up. And I'll try and describe it. And as Paul's technicians are working behind the scenes. So if you envisage that the X and Y diagram, the macro truthers are hugging the y-axis, and no holes barred, throwing out all social trauma. I would say the micro truthers are staying a little close are close to the micro, but they're inclined ever so slightly away for bit of a social orientation there to try and for reasons that I need to understand, but etiquette or what have you. The gilters, on the other hand, are a natural extension of that x-axis. Everything there appears to me to be just tactical discussion for the purpose of trying to further an intended outcome. So we got that far. Let me see if we can get Paul down. Yeah, down to the bottom. That's it, sir. That's the one. That certainly saves me having to describe what this all means. And if only we can get Paul back now. But at any rate, so you see the macro truthers and the micro truthers. The macro truthers lost our diagram. Just see if we can get that. Yeah, we can't seem to have you and the diagram at the same time.
Well, let's try this again then. There has to be a way, doesn't there? There we go. It was at that point it kept freezing. I don't know why, but it seemed to be when it did it the first time, I needed to actually sort of exclude myself and then come back in again, sort of be re-invited to my own room for some reason. But yeah, I don't know what constitutions my wife has set forth in this room that is my own. But
you know what it is, Paul? You're not drinking beer there tonight.
I think that's probably what it is. Yeah, lack of.
You found the problem. So in the diagram, the point there is you've got your y-axis, your x-axis, the macro truthers, notwithstanding all the social etiquette issues and discomfort in what they may have to say. They're sort of hugging that y-axis. Micro truthers are a little further socially inclined, but both are very much, ostensibly y-axis on principle searching for truth. The x-axis, on the other hand, the gilters are a natural extension of sort of a social engineering. They've got the conclusion established. They try to work it backwards, and they try to have creative reasons not to cause us to look any further. Now, interestingly, so let's take Manitowoc law enforcement, for example. Mm-hmm. We know within the ranks there are good police but if we go back to the era of the last incarceration, let's say, there's certainly raised a concern that they've got more of a social inclination than the other. Now we've lost the diagram.
So you want it back up again?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll pop it back up again now.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Just when we hate to lose that. Now that we got it. So yeah, I'm just referring to the Manitowoc law enforcement are fairly socially inclined. The courts is the interesting thing. So if you ask anybody about the courts, one would expect them to be lined up right on the y-axis there, the bastions of principle and truth. But the bitter reality is, I think they're very socially oriented, and so along the lines of what we're seeing there, the mainstream media you'll find will be lower than the courts, more socially inclined, and within that mindscaping, then the question is, where does Kathleen Zellner lie? And in my sense of it, certainly she is, as an individual, very much at the Y. Like, she would know a lot more than she's able to say. She would act differently than she's required to act. But as long as she's tethered to the courts and court procedure, she's a bit of a prisoner for for their standard of trade-off between social and the principle of truth. And so this is going to be the awkward dance. So she can only work through the rigors of the court process to make her arguments, and that's why it's a slow and arduous process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Whereas in the truther community, we're vectored differently. Now we may find with the upcoming Mammothon, maybe discussions do open up broadly, or we may find that out of respect for I think you and I were talking offline
Yeah.
before, Paul, out of respect for the family, and that's a very important consideration. It doesn't serve the purposes of science, but it certainly may be a good reason to curb your appetite for open truth.
Yeah, it's. I mean, getting back to what you were saying about how the courts behave in all of this. Certainly, I've had correspondence from Jerry Buting where he pointed out that Patrick Willis, he was up for re-election at the time of the Avery trial. So of course he's going to go down the route of pampering to the not pampering, pandering to the to the people in Manitrock who are about to vote for him or not vote for him to be in the position that he is.
Right. So when you cast your ballot in the U.S., you're casting many ballots compared to, say, in the U.K. or Canada. Right. We have a parliamentary process where you're necessarily through one ballot making simultaneously a number of different decisions. In the U.S., you've got different elections for different dimensions of this thing, and that's where the politics creeps in. So as you say, Judge Willis up for election. Now the same thing at the state level, all the way on up. And how do you expunge the political opportunism, which is a social dimension, in order to stay on the beaten path of a sort of purist y-axis truth? And so the long story short, I think I've just sort of reconciled myself to the fact that the courts are at best a compromise, and but then reflecting, this is why the notion of KZ being limited is very important. She certainly has the horsepower and the intellectual capability to shoot way beyond what she's allowed to play, and that should be of concern.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to what you were saying about the marathon, for example. I mean, I've always been one of the ones that's always that. I mean, I don't think I've ever, used in any video I've ever used the title, who killed Teresa. It's always been a case of, caused the disappearance.
Right.
Of Teresa Holbach, and whereas I think somebody like Steve Drizzen in the past has actually said, please don't come to me with any sort of hashed together theories that Teresa might still be alive, and it's like, well, maybe you have to go down that line because, as you were saying, because of that axis that says that the courts have to. That the lawyers have to go very much with the courts and be socially acceptable.
So an analytic mind would go where the data takes you, and wouldn't be persuaded by a please behave differently. So yes, I don't understand, and maybe maybe I don't have that right. Where you sort of, or maybe we mischaracterized what was meant there, but. You shouldn't think this way has no place, absolutely, ever, in scientific analysis. That's the other axis. If you want to behave a certain way, you'll get certain behavioral outcomes which won't bear on the truth.
Absolutely. I mean, hopefully at some point we can maybe get to those 7 scenarios that you put together.
Yeah, we can. I mean, that could be another discussion for another day. Another thing might be. Pardon me.
I'd like to go through that. Yes.
Yeah, we could dissect them to talk about what they are. However, I think there are more informed people than I in each. Like it would almost be a matter of. Trying to identify the best authority we have in the pool in each of the branches, but recognizing that in some of those branches, people are reluctant to talk for reasons of etiquette, right? So this is part of the challenge in bearing down and walking down through each of the options.
Yeah, certainly when it comes to Kathleen Zellner, I mean, I've had people get in touch with me that have told me things in the strictest of confidence, and of course that's how they will remain. You know, and I've said to them, you know, relax. I'm sure that although Kathleen Zellner has told you, you know, not to talk about these things, she has a plan at some point in the future whereby these things will be expanded upon and looked at. You know.
Yeah, I think she's been as open as she, and more so than you know. I think she's been more open than one would expect someone in her position to be. But there's a limit to how far she can go. She's got to play the tactical game that's there.
Yes,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
But that, you know, there's a distinction between that tactical game and what's in her head in terms of, in
Absolutely.
principle, what happened.
Yeah.
She would be of two minds.
Yeah, and do you think that in that case then that you know, people such as ourselves discussing this aspect of it on social media is a good thing, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, yeah, because
I certainly do.
Yeah, and this is in part why, you know, to answer that question, I think that's why the XY, we're vectored in a Y sense. We talked, you know, last time about the tremendous responsibility we have, given that we're able to open think this thing. Hopefully we're not inhibited by any etiquette other than the one, the you know, sound analytic method, and that's where we have a tremendous responsibility to make sure we don't go off recklessly, you know, for reasons that don't make sense. So we've, you know, we have to treat that very responsibly. But this is excellent research, and we'll be able to say things that that she knows and she can't, and she knows she can't say. You know, we're in a broader theater.
Absolutely. I was going to say, have we got any? I don't think we've really got much in the way of any questions coming forward, because I think you've done an excellent job of presenting it, whether I've been here or not. So I do apologise for my technical inadequacies, which I can only blame my computer. You know, it's
I think this. So this stuff will start to resonate, I think, when we get certain players that are waiting in the wings. There's more to the truther movement than is portrayed right now.
Yes.
You know, so what, you know, so we're guarded as well, right? So what we wear on the cuff, I'm trying to persuade that we become a little more open in that regard. But suffice it to say, there's some excellent research. Let's say in the macro realm, that will eventually come forward, and that's where we'll all have our critical view of it. By all means, we should be critically thinking at skepticism and that sort of thing, reasonable skepticism, and then the community will decide between the micro and the macro, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that certainly fascinated me, and gave me, I would say, cause for hope, was the fact that from being the hero that Ken Kratz was, to them, Ryan Foley discovering about his sexting, to the way that the media turned, or at least certain aspects of the media turned. You know, they, as you say, they do. Obviously, it's like John Farrack said. You don't go to Wisconsin and tell everybody that the Green Bay Packers are a rubbish football team. You know, it's just you know, it's not a good idea. You know, and so what was interesting was the way that the press turned. You know, they did this complete U-turn on this guy who was the hero because he'd put Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey away, these supposed you know, maniac killers, you know, put them away. But then, you know, they turned on him so viciously in at times. You know,
Yeah, they attacked, almost sort of viciously and personally, but but at the same time, they didn't unearth that larger story as a matter
No.
of social etiquette, right? So, as you're pointing out, we know where our bread is buttered, and therefore our bird dog analysis will be limited to that which is socially convenient, and that's the problem.
Well, I think in the case of certainly Ken Kratz's being exposed, it was Governor Jim Doyle who did that, because he was the one that sort of instigated this sort of let's find out what Ken Kratz had been up to. But I always get the impression that there's very much within the Wisconsin Department of Justice that there are two sides,
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
It's almost like any sort of civil servant, civil service. They are there's clearly factions within that entity, aren't there?
Yeah. So when I use the word syndicate, there's a collective. It's a question, so we don't know this for sure, but it would appear that there's a collective that's operating offside the legitimacy out of the legitimacy of the moorings of their legal framework. There shouldn't be an inner circle. There shouldn't be a syndicate that's working for ulterior motive. There should not be a syndicate at all, right? Everybody should be dutifully doing their proper roles. But it does, if you model the data points, and there's a touch point, a common touch point with a common person that reaches the incestuous players that return time and time again to. It's amazing that the same players keep coming back in. They'll be pulled off retirement. They'll be, they're not allowed to go outside that box of protagonists that seem to be in a pool there. It's an unnatural clique, and I suspect that will have import to what we find it. When we find out what happens, that'll be key.
Yeah, I know it's purely fictitious, but my wife has been watching avidly, and I've kind of gotten into it. Not a documentary. It is pure fiction. Excuse me, but it's a TV show. I think it might be on Netflix, called Line of Duty, but it's from the UK.
Okay.
And it's fictitious, but it's about a unit called AC-12 who within the the police force here in the UK are the anti-corruption police force. They're there to investigate the police who are investigating the crime.
Right.
But it is quite fascinating because you'll see things on the telly that you can say, yes, well, that's done in the studio, but you can definitely see that could easily be the case in real life. That these are the kind of forces at play that are going on,
Yeah, and in fact, this is why I mentioned the sort of legal framework, the constitutional moorings. So someone for all our institutions, and this isn't Wisconsin, this is all over the U.S.
Yeah.
Canada, UK, Australia. I keep mentioning, basically the free world. The legitimacy behind those various different offices, the courts, the police, you name it, government. The terms of reference that are carefully laid out, very detailed, because a lot of work there because of the natural behavior that ensues as it breaks down. So we should anticipate that, right? If heaven forbid these institutions take on too much of a social inclination, they'll be off their moorings, and then what have you got, right? And I would say that's what you've got here is a very
well. If you want to see a model of that, just look at Manitowoc. Yeah.
So in a microcosm, it evolved. Exactly. So I think in our little diagram there, I had put them as sort of a shallow line very close to that dangerous x-axis.
Yes.
And for reasons that may be good in terms of a social sense. So the social fabric of the community may have been improved. I don't know, but certainly the social orientation competes with the notion of an objective truth.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it was interesting when I very first got into Making a Murderer. I saw an article in which they quoted, the actress that plays, I'm going to say Professor Sprite from Harry Potter.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
The rather short lady. I forget her name, but she's quite a character. Anyway, she was saying that this whole Avery thing, it's purely down to class. It's people think that they are superior, they are upper class, these are lower class, they are dispensable. We can do with them as we want because we don't really like them very much. And well, we certainly heard that, didn't we, in Mike Kelly's assessment.
So certainly the truthers have put enough information out there to make that apparent, whether it's a class argument or just a more general social argument. What we're all craving is justice, and I don't see any response to come in here and to the contrary, I see the social agenda spinning different webs to suppress, and books that are written. You take any of those books, and you should be able to bang against that an analytic template and identify the malfeasance in each of the arguments. Is this a matter of circular reasoning? Is it a misrepresentation of fact? Is it an insufficient argument? You can go through with a check mark and annotate the book. And as they say, the reviewers say the covers of this book are too far apart. It's a travesty. And so this tends to be the response, to try to socially bury. And I think we're all looking for an objective truth in there somewhere.
Absolutely. Now, I'm gonna say thank you very much for coming on and joining me again. And I look forward to having you on again fairly soon, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll share some ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, it'll be, I suppose, yes, it'll be interesting as to, how Mammothon goes now, particularly based on the fact that there will no longer be a rally in Manitowoc towards the end of June, obviously, because of the this coronavirus stuff. And so therefore, whether things have started to get better by then or not, I think that's pretty irrelevant. The planning for something like that happens now. So yes, Mammothon becomes quite a big event, I think. So yeah, I mean, as I say, I will continue to use the word disappeared.
Yeah.
Because I don't, I just don't have that. I think none of us have that conclusive evidence that says yes, absolutely. You can go by the fact that the bones are handed back, but then Judge Sutkovich is saying, well, they might not be Teresa's, they might be animal bones. So, it's they can't have it both ways.
Yeah, they argue out of both sides. Yeah. But certainly, we'll see whether this, hopefully, this pandemic we have is not going to delay the findings we're anticipating. What's the date now?
We're anticipating actually the 27th.
27th.
By my reckoning, if the state are going to ask for an extension, by my reckoning, they would have to do it by Thursday, because they've always asked 8 days in advance. They've given it more than a week.
Yeah, there's probably a regulation on that. Yeah.
Well, because they don't want to be seen to be leaving it at the last minute, do they?
Yeah, and plus, I'm sure, and Travis could tell us the logistics in there, but there's probably a limit, a cutoff.
So hopefully by Thursday, or even, well, obviously here in the UK, probably Friday, we will know if the state have asked for an extension. But obviously we wouldn't know that till probably around about the Tuesday, Wednesday of the next week.
Right.
Based on past experience, I would say.
Yeah. Then we'll be on final approach for the 27th. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Anyway, as I say, it's been absolutely fascinating. You know, I mean, I'm the lucky one because you send me all this stuff in advance, and I get a chance to look through it. And you know, it's been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, well, we'll have some more chats soon, and thanks very much, Paul, again for the opportunity to chat. I'm sorry about all that technical headache. We'll have to. I don't know if we'll figure that out, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm as I said earlier, I'm just kind of flattered that you would choose to, you know, reach out to me and you know use this channel as your platform. So
well, we chose you very carefully.
Oh yes.
No, I think, but in just to touch on that, obviously you've maintained a very open mind, and I think that's a testament to the objectivity of the truther community. So I thought you would be very appropriate to approach, and I'm thankful that you opened the door when I knocked.
Yeah. You are very welcome, and might I add, I do have a rather nice drinks cabinet, so anytime. In fact, sadly, my as I've mentioned before, my sort of big day, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, not just my big day, but for everybody involved here in Galashiels, you know, has been put on hold. So you know, I'm rather worried that some of the whiskey that I bought for First to Celebrate might be going out of date soon, so I might have to.
Definitely
might have to put it to good use before.
Yeah, or declare a practice, you know. Yeah,
I think so. Yes, I think
absolutely.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
Okay, man. Yep. Thanks very much, Paul. Yeah, appreciate that.
Thank you, and also thank you to everybody that's joined in on the chat and kept the right side of the screen going. And I do apologise for whatever technical issues are going on here. I think it's just sometimes I'm just a little bit too quick and the computer just freezes for a moment. I think maybe it's just trying to process too much.
We just got to get technology to catch up to you, Paul.
I think so, yes. Or maybe I should just take it a little bit steadier. One or the other.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Fleetside.
Thank you. Thanks,
and we'll catch you again soon. And goodbye to everybody else. Cheerio.